More Canadians are said to be, after separating, choosing to continue living with their former partner, or at least under the same roof. This is, of course, because of high rents and high real estate prices. There are legal implications, things to consider here. We're joined by Ron Shulman, founder of Shulman Partners. Ron, thanks very much indeed for coming on the show. So just remind us what couples are doing here.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. And yes, the economy is not doing well when parties and people are staying together in the same roof, despite the fact that they're separating. It's difficult, it's emotional, and we're seeing more and more of that. We're seeing that people who are separating, they decide to stay under the same roof, and they decide to figure out a solution until maybe prices of the homes will start increasing. They don't want to sell the home too early, or they simply, what we see quite often, cannot afford to move out and maintain their responsibilities to their home and maintain a secondary place to live. So it's becoming more and more something we see and deal with on a daily basis.
So there are legal implications here. Sometimes it can be up to the court to rule, or it can be in question, have people really separated? So for one thing, they have to live in a separate part of the building?
Absolutely. And I think one key misconception we think when we talk about separation, what I see when I talk to clients, is what it is, right? Some people may think, well, I'm not really separated until we're living apart. And that's a misconception, or they have to sign something. The reality is, under Ontario law, a separation is a question of facts. If there is if there's a dispute, a court will consider what makes somebody separated. And the key part to remember here is that a key date of separation is critical to establishing, that's the trigger point for rights and obligations. That's the moment when we split assets. That's the moment which we decide when support kicks in. Mm-hmm. So the factors that court often will consider is something like if people are sleeping in the same room, but that's not the only one. Do they go to family and friends, to gatherings together? Do they present themselves as separated? In some cases, intimate relations maybe or may not be part of that factor for a specific couple. So it's the key consideration here to remember that while one of the spouses may think that they're separated, they moved into a separate room, the other spouse may think that they're still working on the relationship. And that creates, when they get to the point where they actually separate, it may create significant disagreement on date of separation. And that's something which would be very important to avoid for couples who are deciding to stay together through their separation.
I have heard the word abandonment. If one spouse moves out, this could constitute abandoning the house. Now, I'm not sure if it's abandoning the home or the children, but can you put some clarity on what that term means?
Oh, I would. I hear this term so often as well from clients calling in for the consultations. It's a huge misconception. Many people believe that just because they will leave the home, and they will not live at the home, they will lose rights toward the home. I think the key to remember, in Ontario, property division is governed by title, and the relationship that spouses have. So leaving the home will not disentitle a person to their share of the property division. However, and that's a big however, the impact that is seen often by the decision to move is not about property, it's about the children. Because once a party moves out, it crystallizes the change, if there are children, to their routines, to their schedules, and that needs to be established as soon as possible. Otherwise, it's left up in the air. So that really where the impact is, but I will say one thing clearly, there is no such concept as abandonment when it comes to losing property rights in Ontario. It just doesn't work this way.
So it is, it's obviously emotionally not desirable in many cases. Sometimes couples split up and it's fine and it's all cordial, but it causes a lot of strain, I guess, if you have two people living under the same roof, but they're stuck there.
It's what we call in the industry a pressure cooker. It may work for a little bit, but it's becoming increasingly difficult in the longer run. And what we often see nowadays, and that's what really the concern comes from, is people will look into a year. Like, for example, the economy is getting better. The house needs to be sold. Let's wait until next spring market, and we will continue living under the same roof. And that may or may not, depending on the situation, be viable, but it's definitely going to create a huge strain. And considerations need to be put in place. If that is really what the spouses want to do, they need to put some sort of an interim or temporary arrangement in place to make sure that there is a clear expectations. And the other part, which is important, what's the exit strategy? So if it doesn't work, if things do blow up, if things become that one party needs to move out, what will happen? Will the house be sold? Will there be an arrangements made in respect to the payment of the expense? Who will pay them? So those things are so critical to put together, at least on a temporary basis, if this is what the spouses want to do.
Just give us, is there any other misconceptions out there, or are there any other pitfalls that people should be aware of, Ron, before we let you go?
Well, I think the other thing which people need to be aware of is, and it goes back to the concept of separation. A marriage really, after especially many years with children, it becomes like a knot. And once you're separating, the key thing for a lawyer and the key focus for us is to untangle it as quickly as possible. So one big pitfall we see with spouses separate is that they continue to commingle finances. They continue to create even more of this complicated relationship, then we need to untangle. And it's, I think, critical to start conceptualizing once people separate is that, all right, how do we make things cleaner? How do we make things clearer? How do we untangle that web? So maybe payments need to come out a little bit differently and have a clear accounting of what is being paid. Clear expectations. That avoids litigation down the road. It avoids the horror stories people hear about spending thousands, $10,000 on lawyers, because the easier it is, the more clean and simple it will be to sort out.